Okay, I think we can start now. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm happy to have you here, and I'm happy to have my colleagues here too. So now let's look at the agenda. What's up for today? We're gonna present ourselves. So first we start with the who is who, and then Bridget is going to show us the repurposing of business during times of Corona. I think this is now the time more than ever to think about a new society or a new way to do business. So this is also what we're going to talk about today, new ways to do business and how companies can be change makers. That's basically the topic for today. Then we're going to look at corporate responsibility and sustainable management as a new key competence, and why is it so? That's something we would like to show you in the beginning. And after that, we're going to introduce already the tool that we want to focus on, which is the common good balance sheet, and how you can use it to make a difference and how to manage your company in a sustainable and ethical way. Then we go a little bit into depth. What is the balance sheet about? We're going to talk about the values and different stakeholders that are reflected in the balance sheet. Then we have time for Q&As, for question and answers, and we will have a second Q&As after the case study, and at the end we would like to show you what could be the next steps. So how can we continue from today to further working with the balance sheet? So now let's present ourselves a little bit. Maybe Anke, you can start.
All right, yes, I can. Hello, everybody. My name is Anke Schwind. I'm German. However, I've been living in Spain for the past 30 years, so I feel, well, Spanish or global in the end, actually. I'm doing consultancy, and I'm also very involved in education for sustainable development. 5 years ago, I was doing business as usual in the fashion industry and started looking for answers. And somehow on Facebook, I found a meeting about the ECG, the Economy for the Common Good, which is behind this tool, the Common Good Balance Sheet. And I kind of got hooked and I started to get really involved. I did the balance sheet for my company, and that was a bit life changer because I realized I didn't want to do this anymore. And I started going in this direction. Well, I try to help people also find answers to the many, many questions we have. So welcome to all.
Thanks, Anke. Now maybe Bridget, and afterwards I'll present myself too. Wait, I have to, yeah, now it's fine.
Hello everybody and welcome. I'm Bridget. I'm speaking from London in the UK. I first joined Economy for the Common Good 5 years ago. It was at a meeting on the grass in Regent's Park, and I just felt this wave of relief come over me when the speaker was explaining the principles and model behind ECG, and the idea that we can do things differently. We can organise work and the economy differently under different values, and bring ourselves to work and not have to leave something at the door when we hang our coats up. So that was that was a huge kind of shift for me, and I've been started volunteering with ECG. A group of us set up the member association for the UK, which is ECG UK Community Interest Company. My background is in strategy and communications. I've worked with companies and in the public sector, in arts and education and local economy projects. And I also have a role on the International ECG Federation. Thank you. And back to Philip.
Okay, thanks, Bridget. So yeah, my name is Philip. I'm founder of Seeds for Sustainability, and I'm holding a PhD in economics. So my background is economics, but actually a long time, doing my PhD, I actually got really frustrated with economics, and I kind of left my secure job at the university because I was really fed up with the economic system, and I couldn't stand all these neoliberalism thoughts of market over people and profit over people and corruption and lobbies and all these kind of things that kind of mess us up. And I really left my job and didn't want to know anything about economics anymore. I grabbed my surfboard, took my car, and just drove away and said, okay, I just want to be in nature. Please leave me alone. And I stranded here on Canary Islands. And then I went to the university and I saw a poster at one of the doors of one of the professors, which now is a dear friend of mine. And it was talking about the economy for the common good. And I actually didn't know anything about it. That was 2013. And I really got interested, and all of a sudden things made sense again. I gained purpose again in looking at economics from a different point of view, where the human beings and nature is in the center, and all different kinds of philosophies can be all implemented within this philosophy of the common good economy. And that also, like Anke said, hooked me up, or I got a bit passionate about it, and then I wanted to do a project with the ECG. So we started writing proposals for EU projects, and finally we got funding, and we had the chance to push the ECG a little bit on the European level. And since then, I'm more than ever convinced that this should be the way companies go. And when we look at different tools that can measure our impact, for me, the Common Good balance sheet is still the best, even though there's global reporting, there's the global compact, there's other certification systems out there. For me, this is the most comprehensive tool, and this is also why I would like to share insights on that specific tool with you today, and share this with my colleagues. They have a lot of knowledge on that too. So now we can actually go a little bit into the agenda, or continue. Now let's talk about repurposing business. I think now is the time more than ever to think about how can we do business in a different way. And now again, I would like to give over to Bridget.
Thanks, Philip. Could we go to the picture slide, please? That's great. Okay. So here we are in the midst of a global pandemic on a scale that we've never before experienced. And it's great to see that you're logging on from different places in the world, and within our countries, it's affecting us differently. And not equally. The BBC reported today that Black people are nearly twice as likely to die with coronavirus than white people in England and Wales. And of the doctors and nurses who have died, a disproportionate amount are from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. Inequalities and fault lines in society are being highlighted in this crisis. And it's causing all of us to examine how we organise ourselves, where our food comes from, how we travel, how we work. And each of us can probably think of things that we would like to keep on doing differently from now on. And of course, the coronavirus is happening against the backdrop of climate emergency and the financial crash of 2007 and 8. Cristina Figueras, who was instrumental in the creation of the Paris Climate Agreement, was speaking on Monday on these multiple crises. Could we go to the next slide, please, Philip? Humanity has never before been faced with both the challenge and the opportunity to reinvent the way we do what we do. And it's true that there are very many voices in politics, business and society insisting that we don't return to business as usual, but that we build back better, that we link the recovery to a way of working and living, which will ensure environmental sustainability and a more inclusive society. Crises are difficult times, and there's been much suffering, but they do provide moments of opportunity. It was after the financial crash that ECG was first established. The crisis was a prompting moment for Christian Felber and a group of entrepreneurs who knew that already before the crash, the economy was upside down. It wasn't in the service of people and the planet where we live. We were in service to it, with resources being extracted and used beyond natural boundaries and personal limits. The goal of the economy, they felt, shouldn't be an increase in GDP. GDP is the measure, not the goal. The goal should be about providing a good life for its citizens. The purpose of business should be meeting needs through meaningful products and services. The COVID crisis has brought with it suffering and loss, and it also offers a further opportunity to ensure that the way we do what we do is environmentally safe and socially just. Thank you. Thanks, Philip, back to you.
Yeah, what you say is, I think, really important, that in the crisis there lies lots of opportunities, and like you mentioned, that the ECG movement was founded during the financial crisis. So another moment where we think of, is this the way how we should be doing business, and what purpose is actually the market fulfilling? Are we serving the market, or is the market serving us? I think that's one of the main questions we should ask ourselves. Are we slaves to society, or is society actually fulfilling our interests, which should be actually the way? You mentioned climate change. We've faced the COVID crisis, and people are obviously scared about the effects, but the much bigger crisis is still there, climate change. In the beginning of 2020, that was the topic, and people talked about it everywhere before Corona. Actually, that was the main topic, and now it got a little bit out of the picture, but it will definitely go back. So this is one of the reasons why we have no other chance than being sustainable. But now I would like to present you some slides that actually show us, apart from the ideological reasons why we should be sustainable, like inequality, something Bridget mentioned, climate change, poverty, polluting of the environment, obvious reasons why we should be, from an ethical and ideological point of view, be sustainable. But there's more to it. From an economic point of view, now we have more pressure to be sustainable, and I would like to show you why. Today we have the 29th of May. 2 days ago in Spain, for example, we used up all the resources that we could have regrown regeneratively, which is the so-called overshoot day. Every country in the world has a day where we calculate how many resources have we been using that we could have been used in a sustainable way, or in a regenerative way. So the further we move that back, the better. The earlier, the worse. So when you look at your country, it's really interesting to see where you are. And one of the first countries is, not surprisingly, the US. But then we also see that other countries which are maybe less developed, they are only using their resources by the end of December. So we can see huge inequalities already by the use of resources. That's still talking about the ideological reasons why we should be sustainable. Yet it shows also the pressure on the planet, how we're really indebting ourselves when it comes to the use of resources. Apart from that, here in Europe, we have the Green New Deal, but this is not a European phenomenon. We talk in the US, they talk about the Green Deal. And now with the COVID crisis, people say, hey, let's reconstruct the economy in a green way, and let's not go back to normal. Let's build a new normal. And just looking at the numbers, what the EU is planning here, they want to invest $1.6 trillion into a green and circular economy. 25% of that money goes purely to climate change. So we see just by the numbers that this is the future. Europe wants to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. So when you live in Europe, you know, okay, that's the bigger picture. And if I don't want to be lagged behind, I have to jump on the train and be sustainable. So now we're going from the ideological and ethical reasons why being sustainable is important to the economic side. There won't be a way around sustainability anymore. So if you haven't jumped on the train, I urge you to jump on now, because now is still the time to innovate, to be a leader. You can adapt and go late, but now is still the time to lead the game. So this is also why we're excited about sharing this tool, which will allow you to manage sustainability from different points of view. That's why we would like to present it today, basically. We mentioned also the Sustainable Development Goals is also one of the big topics on the political agenda. Those are 17 areas in which the United Nations basically defined what a sustainable world means, going from no poverty, yeah, over decent work conditions, for example, reducing inequality, over climate change, up to partnerships. We're not going through all of them, just so you get a picture. And if you haven't seen those and you haven't been reading up on the Sustainable Development Goals, I really encourage you to do so. It's a really important topic, and it can also help you as a company or as an organization to steer your activity towards the common goal of creating a better world, basically. So that's why those are good guidelines for you to be basically a better corporation. I'm showing you here a definition of the European Commission, what corporate social responsibility actually means. What can I think about it? How can I look at it just to get an idea what it means? So when we think of corporate social responsibility, this means the responsibility of companies for the effects on society. This means we should be social, ecological, ethical, look at human rights, consider consumer issues, and very importantly, be in close cooperation with the stakeholders in the operational management and core strategy. That's why we also present specifically this balance sheet, because it really has all the criteria met that the EU, for example, puts up to be sustainable. So we work along values, we work with the stakeholders, and it should be integrated into a core strategy. And that's why this tool is so powerful, because it allows you to really do this in a practical and relatively easy way compared to also other tools which are out there. I personally think it's still the best and most comprehensive tool. Apart from those reasons, now to finish up the section, why is it important nowadays to be sustainable, not just from an ideological perspective, but economically? We see new generations coming up. People talk about the generation Y or the generation Z, which are the younger generations. The generation Y are those, they're also called the millennials. They are born around the millennia, and they have different values. They value more sustainability. They're also quicker in changing their companies where they buy the products from. So when you're not sustainable, they're easy connected, and they're easy to sanction you by boycotting your activities. When we think of Generation Z, those are the younger generations. Some of you might have heard about Fridays for Future movement. Greta Thunberg obviously is all over the place, and it's hard not to have heard of her. And this is the generation. They want a future. And this is also important to have in mind. Those will be the customers of tomorrow, the employees of tomorrow. So if you want to be a company that is not lacking talent, because nowadays we see also, they call it a war for talents. Now companies, they have problems filling up their spaces with talents, because many people decide, I don't want to work for a company that pollutes the environment. I don't want to work for a company that exploits their employees. So people get aware of the fact through connection, through the internet, knowledge circulates the globe, and we can't do things how we've been doing it along the last decades. And now things are changing. So if you look at science, and what the economic literature actually states is, it makes a difference, a huge difference, to have a corporate social responsibility strategy or to be sustainable in terms of having happier customers, more customers, better talent at your company, and just being more resilient to change. So this is one aspect why nowadays it's so important to become sustainable. Looking at the investor side, we also see a huge change coming up. We see also in Europe, but not just in Europe, that the financial market more and more looks at other data than just the financial data. The central bank in Europe wants to be green. When we look at the Reuters, which is one of the main data sources for financial analysts, now they just launched at the beginning of the year so-called ESG database, economic social governance, which has basically data on environmental impact, economic impact, and social impact of companies. So now investors already look at the non-financial impact of companies. So we now see that only reporting benefits and loss in the future won't be enough. They also like the topic a lot of sustainable development goals. It's a huge topic on the financial market. So this is another reason why being sustainable is not just a question of whether you want to be it or not. It becomes an imperative economically. Looking at society, we see regulations are changing. I just mentioned the Green Deal, but that's not the only thing that's changing in the EU. We had in 2017 the Directive of Non-Financial Reporting. So already here it's obligatory for bigger companies to report your impact on the environment and on the society. For the moment, it's only for the biggest company. Yet we see already there's so-called spillover effects. So imagine you have a big company, stock market listed company, that needs to report their financial impact and how they manage their stakeholders or their value chain. Yeah? So if you're a provider of that big company might ask you, hey, what's your ecological footprint or what's your carbon footprint? And if you don't know how to report it or you don't even know what it is, maybe you won't be chosen to be the supplier in the future because they are obligated to reduce their impact. So if you are not sustainable as a provider, you might be getting out of the picture. Again, another reason why being sustainable is not a question of whether you want to be it or not. Yeah? We will see lots of changes now when Corona is over. Hopefully the political agenda switches back to talking about this much more, and we will see the pressure that is going to be put on companies. Yeah, and last but not least, studies show actually that performance of company is much better when you imply corporate social responsibility or ecological social governance or being sustainable. There's lots of different definitions around. So the science actually states that it's not any longer a trade-off between, I want to be sustainable, but it costs money. So it was always a question or like a trade-off. If you want to be one thing, you can't be economically stable. And it's not the case anymore. So there's a lot of factors that influence that. We can't go through this in depth, but just so you know that this conflict, so to say, is not longer existing. Although it costs money, obviously, to be sustainable, what we see also that there's positive effects on your costs, there's positive effects on your cash flows, on customer satisfaction and many things, and also preparing for new regulations or looking about resilient supply chains. At the beginning of the Corona crisis, a lot of companies had problems getting their resources to actually produce their products. So now thinking about constructing or building up resilient supply chains becomes really important topic, and that's also why it's such a important part of the ESG balance sheet. So now we mentioned the common good balance sheet a couple of times as one of the tools for you to manage this change from being a maybe non-sustainable company to a sustainable company, or if you're already in the mindset of being sustainable, this balance sheet helps you to steer your activities even much more efficiently towards a common goal. And now I would like to give the word back to Bridget, and she will give us a short introduction into the benefits and applications. And then after that, Anke will give us an introduction into the values and stakeholders, and then there's room for your first questions.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, so we've got a copy of the common good balance sheet here, and I'll go into detail a little bit later. Just want to introduce it to you. So what does it do? The common good balance sheet assesses the whole of a company's activities and relationships, and it examines how it does what it does behind the financial balance sheet. It shows how a company contributes to the common good, not in terms of some sort of add-on CSR activity, but in the very nature of the day-to-day business operation. The common good balance sheet is a snapshot of current practice, and its power is as a tool for organizational development and change. Anke's going to talk to us in a lot more detail about the 4 values and the 5 stakeholder groups, but you can see on the sheet here that the 4 values in the columns coming down are mapped against 5 stakeholder groups. And where they intersect, there are 20 themes. Each of these themes asks questions to raise consciousness and prompt exploration of how that value is being lived in the company with regard to that stakeholder. And we'll be looking at some of these in more detail later with a case study of an ECG company. Could you take us to the next slide? Thank you. And so here you see the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that Philip was talking about earlier have been mapped onto the balance sheet. So by compiling the Common Good balance sheet, you can clearly see how you're meeting the SDGs. And the next slide, please. The University of Valencia in Spain conducted a survey of ECG companies, and the results showed that for these companies, very much along the lines that Philip was talking about earlier, staff motivation had improved, corporate reputation was enhanced, carbon footprint reduced, there's a greater sustainability in the supply chain, and higher levels of customer trust and loyalty. And in addition, 95% of companies said that all these positive impacts on their business operations had been achieved at no detriment to sales. In fact, 26% said there'd actually been a positive impact on revenue. Similarly, 85% said there'd been no adverse effect on profit, with 19% saying profitability had been improved. So there's a greater resilience, greater level of sustainability in the company, and also profitability and health and financial health. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bridget. Yeah, you mentioned lots of important points, and now what we showed you earlier, that why is it important to become sustainable, is actually confirmed by the data, and it shows the importance of having good tools to manage, and this is one of them. And now we will go into a little bit more depth into what are the values of this balance sheet and of the economy for the common good, and what stakeholder groups are actually affected by this management. So now, Anke, please give us a short introduction into the values and stakeholders.
All right. Yes, I will. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm learning from you. The values, as you have seen on the matrix, are these. We could say it's 4 because they're divided into 4 columns, but if you look at them, they're actually 6. We have human dignity, solidarity and social justice, environmental sustainability, and transparency and co-determination. So this is actually the how, as Bridget said. How are we going to do this? What are we doing in our company, and how are we analyzing it? These values come from, well, great thinkers and constitutions as how we should behave in society, living together. But these are also the values that help us have better relationships in our personal life. So what I want to do, if you can go to the next slide, Philip. I'm actually going to read out to you the definitions, or part of the definitions, that the team which has done the manual for doing the balance sheet has given. Well, the definitions for the values the team has given for human dignity and for solidarity and social justice. And I'm going to do this a bit like a short 1-minute meditation exercise, because I really want you to feel the values. I really want you to connect to them. I want to really let you go inside and not go further than these concepts, and really, well, feel them, because they're human values, they're emotions. This is how we connect to each other. Okay, so on the cue, Philip, when I start with solidarity and social justice, please go to the next slide. And as I said, I will read now this. You can connect to yourself, just be centered, feel your heart, just be here for a minute. You can even close your eyes, and let's feel human values. Human dignity means that every human being is valuable, unique, and worthy of protection, irrespective of origin, age, gender, or any other characteristics. Humans and all living things have the right to exist and are entitled to respect, appreciation, and attention. As for solidarity and social justice, they are based on a common foundation of empathy, compassion, and equality of opportunities. Their aim is to reduce unfairness, to share responsibility, and to strike a more equal balance between the strong and the weak. Thank you. So as you see, we have appreciation, we have empathy, many things we should bring not only into companies, but in our everyday life. This is really also about a coherence, how we live our lives. And back to business, next slide. Environmental sustainability. I hope, and if not, what you take with you today are these previous values, but also the definition for sustainability. Sustainability is more than environmental sustainability. This is why here we only talk about the environment in this value, how we engage with the natural environment around us. This is another important value, as we have seen right now. We need our planet to be here, to continue being here, and also for the future generations. So this can be evaluated actually when we look at the products and the services, when looking at the whole life cycle of these. And we'll look at that on the slides for the stakeholders. And last one, for the values, Philip, thank you, transparency and co-determination. I'll start with co-determination. This is about the participation of everybody who is affected by the decisions that are being made. So everybody has to be part of the decisions. And in order to be able to do this, we need transparency. Everything has to be disclosed to the people affected by the decisions so that they can actually take part. If they don't have the information, then they cannot take part in the decision-making process. Who are those people? Next slide, we go to the stakeholders. You will actually also be learning a new language today. This is the language of the Common Good Balance Sheet. You see in front of each of these stakeholders, we have letters, A, B, C, D, and E. Usually, when you see the 20 themes, each of these themes has an abbreviation. For example, A1 would be human dignity in the supply chain, and so on. So we have the suppliers, owners and financial partners, employees, including co-working employers, customers and other companies, and social environment. For suppliers, the next. I got this slide from Sustainable Fashion, actually. So this shows a bit the process of how our clothes are made. Where do they come from? This are the orange and red and also the green processes. And then the blue ones is the next, is the end of the cycle, or how the customer is using them. So we are not going to look into them. But as you can see, there's a lot happening in our supply chain. And we, in the Common Good Balance Sheet, we try to actually look at everything. And this is already a starting point for a lot of reflection and improvement, because if you have an international supply chain, then there's a lot of things going on there. As for the next one, owners and financial partners, this is obviously people who hold the ownership of the company, and then any investors or also financial services we use on our daily basis in order to keep the business running. The balance sheet also has a look into these people and how, again, remember, we are talking about always values. How are we relating to these people? And all the reflection and the questions are based on the values which are behind our behavior and our activities. And the next one we have, as I said, employees. This ad, the Smithsonian says, is not a true ad. Shackleton did the Antarctic expedition, but did not put an ad out in a newspaper. But it gives us the idea of a boat we are all in when we're in a company. So everybody who is contributing with their work to an essential part of the companies, this is the employees, and also co-working employers who are helping in the essential business of the company. And the next one, we have the customers. If you look into the other and all the companies, when you look into, well, this comes from lean startup thinking. This is the empathy map. In the end, the company tries to bring value to society, and usually we look like really what are the needs of these people we are serving. And this empathy map gives us even more ideas to look at the company, the customers in other ways. Customers are in the end our users, also the people who are benefited from what we do, also the distributors in some ways or contractors of our products and services. And we also look at other companies, because if we talk about solidarity, there comes another nice word to our minds, which is not competitive advantage, but collaborative advantage. We have to start collaborating with the companies we have around in our region, or even people maybe we think might be our competitors, and see if together we can set new standards for the work we are doing. And finally, social environment. This goes beyond of all these groups we have mentioned before, because our activities, our company has an impact on many, many other things which we might not be aware of, and we have to start being aware. As I said before, this would be stakeholder group E. And here I have brought the 4 values as well. So we have E1, the 2 cute kids. They are standing for humanity as a whole and the future generations. E2, which is about solidarity and social justice, is about the community which is around us in a broader sense, not just our customers, but anybody who is with us, also even on a state level, or let me have a look. There was another word which I'm not bringing to my, it's not coming. It's okay. On a virtual level, so on the internet level as well, there can be also communities out there, okay? E3 is for the ecological environment again. If you remember, 3 is the value environmental sustainability. So we have a big, broad view on the environment. And finally, E4 is for transparency and co-determination. And here I've taken a picture of Amnesty International. This is also about NGOs. Let's collaborate with them. Let's see what they have to say about their business. How can we integrate them also and get new perspectives and do better? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like you can see how important the values are first to understand, and then how can they shape the way we do business. For me, well, now we have the Q&A section, but one thing that to me comes into mind, which is completely different from the current economic model, is the solidarity part. And the balance sheet also looks at how are we solidary to our not competitors. We don't even call them competitors anymore. We want to call them other companies. Yeah, that's already a huge mindset shift, and it's really interesting what happened during the economic crisis in Austria and Germany. Actually, there were companies in that ECG movement. They say, okay, I don't want to see my friends or other companies dying, so they establish some kind of funds on their own to help each other out. Right now, we see also a huge wave of solidarity, and this is one of the things when people think of COVID-19, what is the role of business? We see that there is solidarity, not everywhere, but this is really what distinguishes this model also from the current economic thinking. Yeah? So what Anke said, which I think is really important, and also Christian Felber points it out many times, this balance sheet based on values are those values that we would like to see in place when we have friends and family. Yeah, we want to be trusting, we want to be solidary, we want to be good to the environment, we want to be treated in a dignified way, and we want to also be able to co-determine what's going on. Yeah, think of your household. You don't want to be someone telling you all the time what's going on between adults, okay? And then you would like to co-determine like how everything is run. Why shouldn't it be in the same way? If that makes us feel good, why shouldn't that be the way how we run things in a company? There's no way or no reason why we should have our business life and our private life run under completely different values. Yeah, in the economy, it's more like put out your elbows and fight your way through. But this is not making us happy. This is not how we really are as human beings, and that's why values are really important. And yeah, now is time for you to ask us your questions. We have another Q&A section later, so if there's some questions that can't be answered now, don't feel bad about it. We will definitely go back and answer them. So now the best way is to write your questions in the chat, and then we will try to answer them between us three. Feel free to ask us anything relating to those topics that we just talked about, and then after this we will have a little case study showing you how those maybe now still theoretical things are really done in practice. So feel free. Okay, there's one question. Could you explain how do you use your common balance sheet, or does it come later? Okay, so now it's good question. How do we use the balance sheet? Different purposes. So maybe Bridget, you would like to answer that question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Martha. That's a great question. That does come in what I say a bit later, but it's the key use for your common good balance sheet is it does two things. It gives you a snapshot of your current position, so how things are now in your company, but its most powerful usage is as an organizational development tool. So the common good balance sheet highlights where you're doing well and where there's areas for improvement. So from that you can make an action plan on the areas that you want to focus on. So do you want to reduce your environmental impact? Do you want to really focus down on that sort of D3 area? Or do you want to work more with the staff and involve them much more in the decision-making processes of the company? So the balance sheet is a very good active tool to use within the company. And organizations also use it for their websites. For some companies have designed the common good balance sheet in a really lovely way that makes good kind of ethical marketing for the company, because it transparently shows what they do and raises their profile.
Yeah, I would like to add also to what Bridget said, the authentic element. You know, the points I mentioned earlier, the benefits of being sustainable, they only come into place if that is implemented in an authentic way. And for example, you're not greenwashing. Greenwashing is a huge topic now that everybody's talking about being green. How can you trust anybody stating, "Oh, I'm sustainable"? So this is a good application area of the balance sheet. There is nowhere to hide. There's positive. The normal what corporate social responsibility reports do, they highlight the positive sides. Think of Volkswagen. They had the huge scandal 3 years ago, but they had the best looking corporate social responsibility report. So greenwashing is a huge problem, and this is a huge challenge at the moment. And the common good balance sheet actually has also negative points. So you can't just be only showing your positive sides and maybe not showing that part of your products are done with child labor, for example. It's impossible that you get a good score on the balance sheet. So obviously one main application area of the balance sheet is the reporting. But I like also obviously what Bridget said is you can really use it for your organizational development. Yeah, it gives you a clear idea of what you can do to become better, basically. And when I had my first contact with the balance sheet, it was really an eye-opener for me. Like Anke earlier said, mainly we talk about ecological sustainability. Also, when we talk about the Green Deal, it's talking about being green. It doesn't talk about other stuff. It doesn't talk about let's have a solidary community, let's have dignant workplaces, let's co-determine what's going on. It's mostly talking about being green. And we also have to be careful if the Green Deal is not the biggest greenwashing on the planet. That still has to be determined. But anyways, when I first had contact with the balance sheet, it really showed me, wow, there's so much more in sustainability than just being ecological sustainable. Yeah, I was really into ecological sustainability, hardcore, like only buying ecological food and things like that. And I completely forgot, or I wasn't really aware that there's so much more to it. And when I got my first training, my trainer had like always this nice metaphor. It's like a mirror, like an honest mirror where you can't hide where there's too much or not enough. So it's really being honest to yourself, and it gives you really clear indication where you are and where you can go to. Yeah, and I also like to stretch the fact that you can really use it for innovation. Now there's one company in Austria, they make furniture and they make cosmetics. It's called Green Planet, translated. And they, for example, say, okay, let's not use toxic materials, let's not use aluminum, because we know with aluminum there's also lots of problems with the mining and so on. And I don't know if you have ever been to IKEA and you bought something from IKEA, all the angles and everything to put together is made from aluminum and maybe not really safe materials. So they see that as a way to innovate. They want to produce new materials, and then once you take the challenge and say, hey, I would like to do it better, all of a sudden you're ahead of the game because you're the innovator. So this is also for you a great way to innovate. Yeah, Anke, you also would like to contribute.
Yes, because I also saw the continuing of the question of Martha, and how do we assess the baseline in each area, and are there guiding questions? Yes, exactly. This is how it works. Actually, at the end, we will also introduce the quick test where you can get a feel about how this actually works, what the questions do look like a bit, and how you assess where you are in the different areas and what you are doing right, and what could be improved. And also it talks about the risks. As Philip said, there are many risks out there. Companies are focusing on the good, but the balance sheet also looks at the bad things that are happening, so that we can become aware and start introducing changes. And then there's another question about startups. I love startups, and whose main goal is sustainability. Yeah, sure. I've been doing some things with startups and sustainability, so that would be great. And I don't know what you're doing, where you are, but sure.
Definitely sounds interesting, the question of Enzo, and it's not specifically evaluating your social media presence, but by having in mind the values and how you would like to treat everybody. That gives you also an idea of how you should treat your community in social media. For instance, there's the topic of ethical marketing. And what normally marketing does is trying to introduce you necessities that you don't really have. It tries to sell you something top down, maybe that you don't really need, but they want to sell it anyway. And how do they do that? By creating fear, for example, or playing with your emotions so you buy the product. That is not common good approach. So the same thing then talking about social media management, you don't want to raise fear. You don't want to do the same practice. You're trying to be ethical, which also means you don't want to surveil your community and suck all of the data out of that you can. Like now they talk about big data and how you can boost your business with big data. I see now posts on Facebook, run out the crisis with big data. And I'm thinking, yeah, great. Big data is cool if you use it for the good. But big data can really be bad. Thinking about social media, I don't know if you have heard about the Cambridge Analytica scandal that Facebook had during the Trump elections. What did Facebook do actually? Knowing the algorithm, yeah, you can really influence what's appearing on people's timeline. And that way, supposedly, the Trump campaign won because they knew which of the voters are more or less not really knowing what to vote from social media comments, from their behavior. So then you can specifically influence those people via social media. So the topic of being ethical and sustainable on the digital field is huge, and it hasn't been fully explored yet, but that's definitely an area where you definitely have to look at. And going to the next topic of startup guidance, for myself, our company is also a startup, and my inspiration is the Common Good balance sheet, because it shows you where you can go, and it gives you clear guidance what you should consider. So when you set up a company from scratch, it's ideal. It's like a cooking recipe, how to make the best company from a sustainable point of view. Since we're running on time, I would like to go to Sienna's question, and then after that question, we go to the case study. The intellectual property of the tool is actually, it's under Commons license, so it's an open source tool basically. So everybody is free to use it. Of course, there's a system set up to do the audits, and there's also certified consultants, which is separate, to make sure it's third-party audited, and by that it's objective. So that's also one of the things. Other certifications, they don't have that being so strict, but that's also one of the important things, that if you want to be certified as a common good company, you need an audit or a peer group audit to make sure that what you're saying is actually true. Because like I mentioned earlier, everybody can say, hey, I'm green, make a super good looking CSR report, but then if no one is auditing it and making sure that it's really true, you can talk a lot. Talk is cheap in that way. I don't know, Sienna, I hope that answers that question. And how long does it take to use it? You can actually start right away, which is also something we would like to encourage. At the end, we have a quick test, and by just taking that quick test and writing down the numbers which the quick test asks you to, Anke will later on explain a bit more on that, it shows you already like, oh wow, this is something I can do. And the idea is really to make it vivid and easy to be using. So that's why I like it so much. It's, when you look at it, and it's so comprehensive, and when you look a little bit in the manual, there's some indicators that already show you good ideas. For example, on the ecological sphere, we have the ecological value, and then talking about the employees. For example, the percentage of ecological food you give to your employees. That's already so easy to manage. It's either 100% or 0, and anything in between. So this is something you can manage. So, and that you can start managing that from today on. Or for yourself, are you eating organic or are you not eating organic? That's something to already start implementing right away. So it doesn't have to be a super long process. Oh wow, there's a huge long text. Oh no, it's a private message. Okay, so I think now we can. I was really like, whoa, cool. So for now, I think we can shut that Q&A session, and now we go to the case study. Bridget is going to present a common good practice example to make the theoretical fundamentals a bit more vivid and show that it's actually possible to be sustainable, ethical, and successful. So, stage open for you, Bridget, again.
Yes, you can hear me. Super. Thanks very much, Philip. So now we're going to have a look at a company and see what does it look like to adopt ECG principles. Elobau is a manufacturer of sensor technology and supplies companies worldwide. it is one of the top 5 most sustainable medium-sized companies in Germany. And Ellebau describes its commitment to sustainability in 2 ways. It says that it is people-centered and that it takes responsibility for its direct and indirect impact on the environment. And if we can go to the next slide, the managing director describes his approach as follows. We only have one world. A company has such big levers to change something if they want to. Most of it also pays back, either in financial terms or in people. Job applicants may have a choice of 5 companies, but they choose Ellebau because of our sustainability record. It cannot be about short-term financial gain. The value to the company of certain individuals may be worth millions in the long term, but it's actually not about money at all. We must look further ahead. We only have one world. So if we go to the next slide, please. And the first area we'll look at is D3. Excuse me. So D3 looks at the impact on the environment of the use and disposal of products and services. Ellebau keeps its environmental impact of its products to a minimum by making sure, ensuring as long a lifetime for its products as possible. The products are modular in design so that the parts can be separated and repaired and recycled. So this is much, this is the sort of thinking of the circular economy, where things can fit back into natural life cycles. And so products either go back to the biosphere or to the technosphere and are reused. Ellebau offers carbon neutral products because the company includes scope 3 emissions in their carbon footprint calculation. So scope 3 emissions are ones that occur higher up in the value chain. And the company compensates for these emissions. Could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So B2, B is the stakeholder group that relates to owners and financial resources. And B2 is about the social position in relation to financial resources. So the question really is, what happens to the profit in the company and how socially useful is it? ECG is clear that the surplus funds should be first allocated to the continuity and further development of the company and to securing its reserves. So before any profit is distributed to shareholders or owners, that the money is used first to secure the ongoing viability and further development of the company. Ellebau reinvests 90% of its profit into the company. The remaining 10% goes to the charitable foundation which owns the company. And we see here that the picture, it's quite hard to find a picture for how do I reflect 90% of the profits being held in the company. The picture actually relates to E2, and if we go on the next slide to E2, because E2 is about contribution to the community. So that 10% that goes to the charitable foundation, how that money is spent appears in E2. So in addition to, the picture that we're seeing, the plant for the planet, is one of the education programs by the foundation. And this is an environmental project working with 10 to 12-year-olds, where they have a forest planting campaign. And in addition to the programs run by the foundation, Ellebau's other contribution to society is that it produces more electricity than it consumes through its 9 electricity generation facilities. So the surplus of that electricity goes to the grid. We have the next slide, please. And C1, C relates to employees, and this C1 is about human dignity in the workplace and the working environment. We saw earlier that one of Ella Bau's commitments is towards a people-oriented corporate culture. And the company has a range of working groups for employee involvement and improving workforce culture. It disbanded the management board in favour of a committee with all executives represented. And the company is keen to develop further employee engagement and self-organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Questions again from you? We had one question that wasn't answered earlier. I can answer that first, or we all try, and then we can talk about the Ella Bau case. Actually, the question was really interesting. It's about the COVID crisis, and the argument was that now when we're going out of lockdown and we're starting to rebuild our supply chain, the prediction is that now profit is over everything, and that maybe the environmental effect will be less considered. And then the question is, what do you think should be the measures to prevent this negative effect from happening? Yeah, that's a really, really good question. We see also, unfortunately, that during this crisis in the United States, like I think around 40 laws to protect the environment were just thrown out of the window, achievements from the last decades. Also, what I perceive, there's now a pandemic of plastic everywhere. Unfortunately, people just throw their masks and their gloves everywhere. We have huge rise in plastic. Now even in the supermarkets, stuff that hasn't been wrapped in plastic now is wrapped in plastic. So the opposite, actually, of what we want to achieve. Yeah, it's a big problem when it comes to that. Apparently, the plastic, it is helpful to prevent the pandemic to spread, but the plastic itself, based on petroleum, is a bad thing. But fortunately, and that maybe answers a bit your question, there's a huge research going on now in bioplastics. That's also a huge topic now in the Green Deal. How can we produce plastic that is not harmful and that actually decomposes once it should decompose? And some supermarkets, fortunately, already wrap stuff in plastic that is made from cellulose and can decompose when you put it into a composter. So that could be one solution. And to prevent these kind of things, that's a huge responsibility on the government, from my point of view. And again, companies, they should be aware of the problem. Yeah, this is one of the things that come up to my mind. Maybe you would like to add something too. Anke, Bridget, any comments on how to prevent this problem of post-COVID?
I was just thinking about the alternatives you were talking about to plastic. One of the ECG companies, Vaude, who manufactures outdoor clothing and equipment, they've done a huge job in using alternatives in their products, and they make a kind of plastic toggle out of castor oil instead of petroleum oil, and they use milk fibers in their lining of their walking boots. And so when people put there are innovations, and there are alternatives available. But the question that Vaude raised, Antje von Davids, was at the United Nations as an example of how can companies achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And her point was it has to be tied to legislation. So companies that are not using these alternatives need to be penalised. And that's the way to drive innovation And with the recovery, many people have been asked for the funding that's going towards companies should be tied to conditions to behave more environmentally sustainably. Anke.
Yes, thanks. I always like to also bring in again like our personal perspective, and lots of things are happening around COVID. I'm aware of that. But I hope also that maybe it brings a shift of awareness in more people. Not all of us, but just maybe to have faith that during these trying times, more people are becoming aware and are willing to really help and find new solutions about what is going on. And for me, it's like the point of our own agency, and that everybody is starting to move in the same direction. So maybe that will be also that we have like more human beings thinking in that direction. So let's be positive sometimes also.
That sounds good, being positive. Yeah. Another thing I think which is also important when you just talked about legislation, Bridget, and that's why also in the balance sheet it recognizes the fact that sometimes we have to raise the standard in the industry. It can't be done by one company alone. So when the auditor looks at your company, it also wants to know, what are you doing to make your industry better? And this is where this comes into place, because if only one company tries to be better but everybody else is not, then obviously you're having a negative, you're lacking behind, and they maybe have a competitive advantage. So in the end, you decide not to do things in a better way. So that's why it's important to work together also with legislators and raise awareness about these things. And some things just can't be done by the company. So in the end, it's not a question of corporate social responsibility or consumer responsibility or public responsibility. It's a question of all three of them, minimum. So it can't be done only by the companies, can't be done only by the customers, because you see also the argument around like, oh, if we stop buying from the companies, then it will end. Or yeah, the politicians have to solve the problems. Oh no, it's the companies, they're doing bad. So in the end, it's just blaming everybody else and not assuming your own responsibility. And this balance sheet shows you clearly how to take how to take responsibility and where you should assume responsibility, something you maybe haven't been aware of. Yeah, I hope that answers the questions. More questions from your side regarding the practical example, or all clear so far? We still have time for more questions before we go to the next steps. If everything is clear, that's also great. Yeah. Yeah, and if there's questions, obviously you can also write us an email afterwards and contact, and we're there for you, but we also offer you the opportunity for more. So yeah, no more questions so far. I think now we can go to next steps, and if there's more questions, feel free to write them in the chat. We have time, but it's also okay to not overstretch Friday afternoon. Yeah, leisure time is coming up pretty soon. Wait, there's maybe a chat. Okay, great. So yeah, next steps. Now Anke would like to talk about the quick test and how it can help us actually. One moment, I will have to share the screen so Anke can explain a little bit about the quick test. I hope now you can see my browser. I think so. Yes, great, good. Well, let me unmute. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. Here I am again. Hello. So this is the quick test, which we mentioned before. I want you to go to the second page, if possible, Philip, so we can have a look at the first question. Okay, as we said before, we are looking at stakeholders and values together. This is A1. As an example, human dignity in the supply chain. So in this quick test, we have like a first very open question, okay? These are open questions because the quick test invites you to start reflecting and start to look in the company for the answers. What are we actually doing? What is happening around here? So that first question is, what do we know about a supplier's commitment to respecting human dignity, for example, the quality of the workplace, especially that of our larger suppliers? Okay, so first stakeholder to look at is like the largest supplier we have and what are they doing. I actually did that with my suppliers when I had my fashion company. So I went to the Netherlands and I visited my suppliers, and you know what, and I'm always very on the personal side, you will see that. I had such a great conversation with them. It was so inspiring, actually, because you start to talk about these things also, and you get to know these people and you see their values as well. So even though I left the company because of other many things, I still am very grateful for the suppliers I had. So this is the question. Now we have a rating level. You see -4 to +4. The ultimate goal in this case is that the company can confirm that the social risks in the supply chain are being reviewed and evaluated, and that measures are being taken against serious grievances and human rights violations. Actually, if you go back to the first page, Philip, here you have like the scale. Martha asked about that baseline. Here we have 0, which is the baseline. This is usually the legally required. We are doing everything as it should be done. But, and you see this in red, as I said before, no risks are involved in this case, but maybe we don't know yet. This is really the awareness question. As for fashion, it's the second most polluting industry in the world. And also, well, I guess you've all heard about the human conditions people are working under it. So not nice, but sometimes we just don't think about it. So this is the baseline to look at, to start reflecting with the questions of the quick test. And this reflects in the end, like the larger the balance sheet in itself, it's much more complete, many more questions. Also the evaluation and the ranking is done differently, but you also always have like this kind of step by step. We are going up and we're coming to 4. Can you show 4 at the top? No, the other one. No, sorry. Yeah, that one, the green 4. Okay, well, we are aiming for exemplary activities and actions, innovative ideas and realization, best practices around. This is the goal we are going for, and this, as Bridget also said before, this is a tool for constant improvement. This is why, because you first have a look, where am I? And what is the evidence around that? That's what we do with the balance sheet. You bring in evidence, what you're doing, you bring in indicators about what you're doing to really be objective. And from there on, we can take more actions towards innovative ideas, or, well, conversations just around topics we might not have had before because, well, it wasn't on our radar. But as the studies have shown as well, they bring a lot of benefit to many issues in the company. So, well, I hope you get inspired.
Yeah, thanks, Anke. For me, like, it's really interesting when you look, well, you will get the slides afterwards. And then there's we saw the slide with the supply chain. And when I look at these pictures where you look at the supply chain, what always pops into my mind immediately is like how many people are affected by the way we do business. It's not just the extraction of raw materials, it's the distribution, it's the processing, it's the end consumer, it's the and then there's not just the direct and there's indirect trade unions, and then your suppliers have more suppliers, and like that's where you see so many people are affected by what we do. And obviously we have a huge responsibility how we deal with with our suppliers. And that's why I like this quick test also, because just by raising the right questions, there's already a change process being triggered. And then thinking of how a virus can spread, we see that we see it immediately now thinking of COVID. When I talked with a colleague of the ECG from Austria, he said, well, we talked about doing a questionnaire for suppliers, and he made this idea: when you ask the right question, can spread like a virus. Because now, having these questions, you can not only ask them to yourself, you can start maybe, and that's another way how to implement these ideas immediately. Why don't you develop a questionnaire for your suppliers and ask them, how do you treat human dignity in your company? What do you do to ensure solidarity and things like that? Are you co-determining what you're doing in your company together with your employees? All these kind of questions that we first raise ourselves, we can now turn back and ask our suppliers or our employees or even our customers, and just instead of just having a boring customer satisfaction survey, how like, let me rate from 0 to 5, how satisfied are you with my product? Maybe I can use that point of contact with my customers in a complete new way by asking them questions about the common good. Yeah, we also would like to know, how do you dispose the products that I'm giving you? For example, are you encouraging secondhand use? Things like that. Why not? This is a great way, again, to steer or to spill over the idea further from you to other people. And that's why asking the right questions can many times already have a huge impact. And that's why this quick test is really a cool way to already make changes. Because the most apparent change is the mindset change in the beginning. And like Anke said, it's a continuous improvement process, like Kaizen, basically. We're never perfect. The environment is dynamic. There's always something new coming up, and we maybe never reach 100% sustainability. But the goal is to go there. And this is why this quick test is already a great way to raise awareness. But this obviously is just part of the picture. The full balance sheet, like we saw, has 20 topics, and within each topic has different aspects, so or different questions we have to answer. So obviously it's a huge picture, and that's why we also encourage, don't look at the whole mountain. Start small, first steps. This quick test is a great way. And also, don't get overwhelmed. Don't think, oh, now I have to do everything. Like Bridget mentioned in the beginning, see it as an organizational development tool. Define your first roadmap. Define some key performance indicators where you want to improve, like how I mentioned, organic food. Or how do you treat your supply chain? How do you treat your employees? Do you co-determine anything with your employees? For example, the vision. Or give your employees the balance sheet and let them talk about what they would like to improve on, instead of you top down telling them we have to improve on this. Use this again as a chance to interact with your environment. So this is the quick test, and I think you got it in the chat, and we gave you the link, so you should have it, and you can also Google it in case you didn't get the materials now. So this is something you can easily find. What could be the next step? So maybe you've already seen on the Eventbrite page where you registered that we also have a full course planned, where we would like to go into more depth for those that are interested and would like to know more, because it is a complex topic that you can't just learn about in 1 hour, and there's things that you can learn your whole life, obviously. So we designed a course where we go into each aspect of the balance sheet in more depth. And what can I expect from this course? We will know the balance sheet in a more practical and vivid way, look at case studies, and also discuss it, apply it, and things like that. We will know the relevant details that we have to know when we want to do a reporting and prepare for an audit. The idea is that we will give you really close tutoring in live sessions. So we have work groups and breakout sessions where we, for example, discuss the values, like how Anke mentioned earlier. It's a really important topic and not so easy to capture in 1 minute. It's a good exercise to reflect on each of these values and how each value, for example, could be implemented in your company. So these are the kind of exercises we would like to do with you. Again, we will, in the first module, for example, we will take the quick test and then discuss about the quick test, because now you will maybe do the quick test at home and lots of questions will come up. And these are the things it's good to accompany you in that way. It's something that is not as apparent, and if you read through the manual, you get some insights. There's a manual for the balance sheet, but I personally learn a lot from experience from others and sharing experiences and seeing good practice. So this is what we offer here, also for you to get a better understanding on the quick test, for example. Important for us also is that we network within with like-minded persons, because this is for me also one of the main advantages when it comes to the ECG. When I look at my corporations from my company, most of them I met in the common good community. So for me, knowing this balance sheet, for example, creates some kind of a common denominator, and I don't have to discuss with everybody, what do you understand is sustainability? When I know that they are from the common good movement or from that community, then I know we have things in common, and that's what I like about it so much. Then key in our course is that we develop our own project, so that you come to us and tell us, hey, this is what I would like to learn, or I have this problem in my company, or I have this and that situation. How can I now use this balance sheet to help me solve my problem or advance in what I'm doing? And that way we also will know how to authentically communicate and establish priorities when it comes to your strategy for the common good, for example. Just to give you a quick idea, how would the course look like? We will start with the first module. It's a double session here. We will have, again, an introduction into the balance sheet, and there we will talk about the quick test. We have little peer groups where we discuss our outcomes and also develop some kind of best practice guidance for us. Then we look deeper into the sustainable supply chain management. Then we go through the A, B, C, D, E, like Anke mentioned earlier, new vocabulary for all of us. So we start with the first group, A, which is the supply chain, then B, the finances, C, employee relationships, then D, customer and other companies, and E, the environment and society. And at the end, the idea is to present your project with us, share it, and that way make it really tangible and have your first steps of action already involved. And before I continue to the next slide, I will check if there's questions. No, only thanks and goodbye. That's fine. And if you're interested, you can either go through the course by module, so you don't have to think, oh, I have to do the whole thing. You can also pick your topic if you like to. So the module 1 is already open for registration, again on Eventbrite, so there's a more detailed description for you if you're interested. And if you would like to do the full course, I recommend you going to the website and register there, because if you get the whole course completely, we obviously give you a discount and want to value that you would like to go the whole journey with us. So we're looking forward to seeing you again, and we just want to say danke, thank you, merci, grazie, gracias, dankjewel, and whatever kind of other language you can think of, saying thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Anke and Bridget, for being here, and I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Evcharisto, that's something I forgot, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry I can't pronounce the next thing, but maybe you teach me that then in our in the webinar. Yeah, I can put the event. I will in the follow-up email. You will get also the Eventbrite link. There's going to be a recording of today's show too, so we'll have the recording too. So I will send you the links then via email, because I can't access them now quickly. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice weekend and enjoy your Friday.